Everybody walks up to the table with a game plan, but the best players spot your game plan before turn 1 even begins. My name's Chris, and in this video, I'll be going through how to read your opponent's game plan before turn 1 even begins. I hope you enjoy. The big picture. How's it going, everyone? So yeah, this video is going to be about how I go about figuring out my opponent's game plan and how I can potentially alter my game plan to include some counters to their game plan, whether that might be deploying things differently, approaching the game slightly differently. You don't want to change your overall game plan because that's how you built your list to perform. But there is certain things like, oh, maybe instead of this unit going to my expansion, it goes towards my opponent's expansion instead. Little things like that, because they can change the tempo in a game, or if your opponent has a unit that is an issue for you, deploying in a way that you're mitigating that issue in the early game until you have a chance to deal with that issue. So stuff like that. So that's kind of what this whole video is going to be about, and that's kind of the big picture that we have here. List design. So the first main topic we're going to be talking about is list design and how you can identify issues in people's lists, or issues for your list, or like how they're going to play dependent on their list. So I have a couple of like mock lists here that we're going to have a look at. The first one being a World Eaters list with 10, 20, 20 Berserkers, Khan and 2 Lords on Juggernauts, a Rhino for Khan's unit, a Slaughterbound with 3 Exalted 8-bound, 3x2 spawn, and a unit of Jackals. This is in Berserker Warband, so they get all the normal tricks. This is kind of a stereotypical list you're seeing at the moment. The idea with this list is it wants to put a lot of pressure on your opponent, right? So the first thing I see is 2x20 mans that have access to either advancing charge or they're just naturally quite fast, you know, being a 10-inch move unit. So they want to be putting a lot of pressure on. And then I see the 3 units of 2 spawn. I'm like, okay, so that's the early game. That's the scrimming, the early game mess around units that they have. That's what they're using there. And the Slaughterbound is an answer to a vehicle. So the Slaughterbound with 3 Exalted 8-bound, they're there to answer a vehicle that could be an issue for this list. So they're there to be that solve. So like you're going into knights, cool. They pick up, you know, they don't pick up, but they do a lot of damage to a big knight. So then the rest of your army can kind of get that ball position that it needs. They're kind of like a little bit of a hedge there. But that's kind of the basics of this list. That's the first thing I think of. They're going to stage both units of 20s very aggressively, and the Khan unit is going to probably be cleanup crew for the turn after. That's often how these kind of lists work. So that's kind of that's all we're going to go into with these lists. It's just what is their game plan, how are they going to play it. That's all you kind of take away from the list. You don't have to go into the specific units. If there's an issue, a unit that's a big issue for you, say you have a lot of vehicles, the Slaughterbound with Exalted 8-bound is a real big issue for you. So understanding that is an issue unit because you have a lot of vehicles or a lot of monsters. The next list we have is Chaos Knights, and this is an Infernal Lance list with an Atropos, double Despoiler with double Gatling Cannons, 3 Carnivores, 2 units of Nurglings, a Beast of Nurgle, and Rotigus. So again, really trying to go quick here and just kind of understand the basics of this game. So Infernal Lance, you either get sustained lethal or an extra bit of movement or a defensive buff on your opponent's turn. So that's kind of what you got to think there, and one of the Despoilers is most likely going to have the enhancement to gain assault, so you have quite a bit of speed and good quality guns. The 36 shots from the 2 Gatling cannons puts a lot of just damage on things, especially with either access to sustained or lethals. So those are good damage dealing points. The Cerastus is there to deal with other big things and get through those high damage, those high toughness, multiple like high wound value units as well. And then you got Carnivores to play the early game, Nurglings to move block your opponent, Beast of Nurgle to do some actions, and then Rotigus to be that spanner in the works. Rotigus is really durable. He can hold an objective. He can deny primary really well with his -1 OC aura, and he kind of plays that kind of game plan. So they're definitely wanting to poise aggressively, put Despoilers and the Atropos in a position where they can capitalize on touching into ruins and hitting you in where you would normally be safe. So identifying where are you actually safe, where can you hide, especially in like WTC ruins, there's places where you can just physically ram things into the corner so you are safe. So kind of working out that, where can you be, where can you go, deploying in a way that the Despoilers can't table you turn 1, which is really important, making sure that you have answers to the carnivores early game and then answers to the despoilers in the later game, and also being able to kill the chaff like the Nurglings and the Beast of Nurgle is really, really important here. And then lastly here for the list analysis side is we have an Adeptus Sororitas list. So this is the Sisters list. It's Hallowed Martyrs with Morven, Canoness, Demonifuge, Hospitaller, Palatine, and Junith. Then we have a Novitiates unit, a Seraphim unit, or 2 Seraphim units, 10 Sacrosants, a Dominions unit, a Penitent Engine, 2 Mortifiers, a Paragon Warsuit unit to go with Morven, 2 Immolators, and 2 Castigators. So what I see here is a very wide list. It has lots of units. It splits up the Novitiates and the Dominions, so you have multiple access to small units to go nice and flip primary, do stuff like that. The Immolators and Castigators are really great comboing together because getting the +1 AP and ignores cover can really push through a lot of damage into either vehicles or elite infantry units. So seeing that if you have those, those could be an issue. The Paragon and Morven unit is a really good kind of damage dealing piece, and it does good damage in shooting and in melee. So being able to mitigate it, either it's shooting or it's melee, can be really important to dealing with that unit. So these kind of things are things that I think are really important to make sure that you are dealing with in your game plan. How do you deal with all the small units? Can you move block them? Can you set up overwatches to get rid of them? All these kind of like little things that you can do to mitigate this list. So have an idea in how they want to play their game plan, so then you can figure out how you can counter it yourself. Deployment tells. So deployment tells are like tells in poker, right? The things that this unit is probably going to be going in this position because it is the most logical and the best position for it to be in. You don't even have to play the army to understand, like, well, if you have, say, like we have in our first example here, with the World Eaters army from earlier, with the 220 units and then Khan and the Rhino, is, well, they're probably going to deploy in very obvious places in this matchup, right? If there's going to be guns, they're going to deploy behind the ruins. If you don't have guns, they're going to deploy directly on the line. So it's like, that's very obvious. And if they're deploying both units, one of them's going to go behind this ruin and the other one's going to go behind this ruin. Pretty obvious things. These are the deployment tells, the things where you know they're going to go. You know they're going to put a unit of spawn to go onto the natural expansion, and another unit of spawn at the other objective to flip that. And they're also probably going to have, if they have this third spawn, it's probably to be able to do an action in the middle. So they're doing these things. You know they're going to be doing these things. So you can, in your deployment, you know, well, these units are going to be going here. So that's kind of very obvious, right? We've got a couple of examples of deployment tells that we're going to go through. So this is the first one. The next one we have here is a Chaos Demons list. And you're either going to have Rotigus or a Great Unclean one on your to go towards the natural expansion. So Rotigus is probably a bit better here, but really these two are interchangeable. So you know one of them is probably going to be going to the natural expansion. You're going to have a big brick of safety behind this kind of ruin here and this tipping point deployment here. These might be a bit closer further forward, depending on the range of your guns and your threat ranges. But really, this is kind of like generically where it's going to go. One of these is going to be getting lifted up at the end of your first turn because they want to be teleporting it either onto an objective or something like that. And making sure that you're screening out, because one of your lost conditions here is like if you don't screen out the middle and that can teleport down onto it, that can be a real big issue as well. So stuff like that can be really, really important to understand. But just knowing that, okay, this army is going to start quite far back and isn't that fast. It does have teleports, it does have deep strikes. So you got to keep that in mind, but you can actually deploy fairly aggressively against a list like this and be, fairly safe. Yes, there is some good shooting, but some of it is also not the longest range. Like a lot of it's like 18 to 24 inch range. So knowing that, it's like, well, okay, I can get onto this fairly safe and I can stage up to attack this. If there is a Great Unclean one or Rotigus here, remember he can't go through walls in this Chaos and Incursion detachment. So he's going to get to there. So if you can put enough OC on to out-OC the Great Unclean one or Rotigus, that can be like a condition. So that Sisters list we talked about earlier, have it set up with an Immolator here so you can send out units again and again to flip this primary. Can be a really strong way of playing that. So stuff you can do like that. But yeah, this is kind of like the tell here is they're probably going to put a lot of things towards this side because this is the most open way. They can go this way and they can go this way. There's the kind of main ways that this army is going to be playing the game. This list is lacking a couple of units. There's probably going to be a couple of Hound units, probably one to go on to each objective. and something that can go into the middle. But for the tells, it's really the big things is where you really expect to know where they want to go. Then next we have Black Templar's Gladius Task Force with triple repulsor executioners. This is on a Crucible battle deployment. So you have a repulsor executioner at the top here. It can move onto this terrain and see through the top windows to see down here. It can also tuck its booty out through there with a pivot and see down this line as well. It can also move this way if it needs to with an advanced roll. So you go like Tactical Doctrine early, so you can kind of get up into this position a bit more aggressively depending on your opponent's list, or on your list, I guess. And then this one, similar, it can stage up here, and then it can have aggressive lines down this line, and then the same with the one at the bottom. It can move down and then get lines through there turn one. So really pressuring the middle and then pressuring the side objectives. And then you have your melee units. So you have like a unit of assault intercessors here. They can stage up here and be aggressive this way. And you have another unit, say like Romaldus's unit, that's going to stage up in the other spot where the assault intercessors with Emperor's Champion are not. And then they're there to like potentially run forward and then get and be quite aggressive onto your opponent's expansion here. So stuff like this that you kind of they're not going to deploy on the line unless you don't have any guns. So if you have guns, you know they're going to deploy a bit more safe, a little bit more conservative, to make sure that they can't be seen. And yeah, it's something fairly similar to this. There might be a reserved repulsor executioner here, and if they do that, then you know that there's probably going to be a repulsor executioner on either side. They probably just drop the one in the middle here, so then they can still get lines down all the different angles that they need. So yeah, that's kind of like the tell here. And then the last one we have here is a Montcar Tower list on search and destroy deployment. So what you can see here is if you get first drop, you drop down a unit of Pathfinders here, because they can scout back behind the wall if you don't go first, but then you get all this nice infiltrator unit up the top here with a Ghost Keel and a unit of stealth teams. You get a nice scout with this Piranha here. You have a Ethereal here with Strike Swiftly, so you can scout a couple of things. Like this Hammerhead can go forward and backwards. This Riptide can move off this if you don't go first. So here's a really aggressive deployment, but because of the amount of scouts, you actually have kind of like almost a redeploy. And we'll go into redeploys in a minute as well, because they're an important topic to talk about. But what we see here is, yeah, you have like Riptides that can take angles down here. But so for you know if there's going to be, fairly aggressive staging here, that if you put a good gun unit here, which is actually a difficult place to get to, or a good melee unit here, you can attack a lot of this really early, and it can be quite a powerful position to put the pressure back on the Montcar player. If you can have a unit here that, say, the Riptide can't get to turn one because of the tight angle from getting that way. And same with these. Maybe they'll get shot by a unit of Pathfinders, but that's really it. But if you also have infiltrators or other units, you can also kind of block a bit of that sight line by putting a unit here as well. That's kind of it. Like you're going to see, like they're going to try and lock down the primary by getting their expansion. They're also going to try and pressure your primary as much as possible with a couple of Riptides or a couple of Hammerheads. There's also probably one Hammerhead in reserve that can really just kind of help them punish this as much as possible, and also just shoot into your deployment zone really aggressively. So with that in mind, how do you deal with that, right? So that's kind of what you want to think about. Like, well, I can have a unit that sits here that can be aggressively pushing this. I have another melee unit here that's pushing this. And then my shooting units are going to start a bit more safe just in case they do go first. I don't want to lose them turn one, but then they can come out or even reserve more things just so you can, making sure you're getting those activations out of them can be really important. So stuff like that is what you need to kind of think about. How do I adjust my game plan to counter their game plan, the natural way that they want to play the game? You don't want to just lean into how your opponent wants to play the game. Redeploys. So with that being said, redeploys, as I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, are a really important thing to deal with as well. I don't have any slides for this specifically, but it is something that I really did want to talk about, which is if you're looking at deployment tells specifically, you really don't want to, if you know your opponent has redeploys, just deploy the best way you think you can. And you can still kind of go to those tells a little bit because there's going to be obvious places where things go. But if you deploy in a way to counter that, and then they can deploy their unit in a better position, just think about that, because most redeploys is 3 units and they lift them all at once, so they can swap positions. So just be quite mindful of that as well. It's a really important thing to understand. Redeploys are a way of kind of not tricking your opponent, but getting you to deploy in a bad way, because then they can fix it themselves in a later point. So that's a really important thing to just be keep in the back of your mind. If your opponent has, like, say, like an Armin for the Thousand Suns or something like that, that they can redeploy this unit, the Kroot Farstalker unit, that the character that can redeploy them, like things like this can be really important. Just keep them in mind, yeah, that they can be there and that they can kind of trick you in a way to maybe deploy in a bad way. So just go back to your generic game plan of, hey, this is where things should go, so this is where I'm going to put them, because this is how my game plan gets played. So it's kind of like the counter to the counter. So you just end up going back to your original game plan. Building a counter plan. So that leads us on to the counter plan. And what do I mean by the counter plan? So this is kind of like a breakdown of what we've gone through, is how you've gone through those parts, and this is kind of the breakdown. So I'm just going to read this verbatim. So number one, you want to understand what your opponent wants to do with their list, their deployment, and the first 2 turns, and plan to play around this. So what I mean by that is you want to understand where your opponent's deploying, what's in their list that's going to break your game wide open and be bad for you, and play around those things. And then also plan, like, where does your opponent want to be turn 1? Where does your opponent want to be turn 2? Because if you can gauge where they want to be, you can set up units to be problems for your opponent in these positions. So that's kind of a really big way of being able to, well, they want to get this ghost kill here, but if I put this unit that's really good at killing a ghost kill within range of it, if it does go there, then he's probably going to be not incentivized to do what he wants to do. So then he's playing suboptimally to his generic game plan. So stuff like that is like, how can I use like threat projection and stuff like that, or even rapid ingress threats to move things back, right? So stuff like that can be really, really important. Number 2 is know what the problem units are in your opponent's list and plan to play around them. Bait them out or just outright kill them. So this is, again, I've talked about this before in this video, where it's like, understand what units are an issue for you. Is it more of an Val's unit? Is it the Exalted 8-bound because you have a bunch of vehicles? All these kind of things. Understand what the issue is, and then try and figure out a method to getting through it and just dealing with it, you know, whether it's move block, you know, whether it's shooting with indirect, or whether it's just trying to kill it before it can get to your juicy targets, right? Like, it might be worthwhile to sacrifice a suboptimal unit in that game to try and bait the Exalted 8-bound out, so because they're the best thing there to kill that unit, and then you get to kill them before they get to kill your bigger thing, right? So like, setting your opponent up to be able to do some misplays might be a way of trying to deal with it. Obviously, if playing perfectly, your opponent isn't going to make those mistakes, but it's a way of, you know, tempting them at least, or maybe making them do suboptimal plays. And then lastly, with all this in mind, still play to your general game plan, but adjust where needed to counter lists. And I really wanted to like push this down, is to counter your opponent's game plan doesn't mean to rewrite your own game plan. It's how do you adjust your own game plan to help mitigate any issues that might arise from your opponent's game plan. So yeah, so don't completely, like if you're playing a Gladius Task Force Space Marine army and you want to be flipping your opponent's primary and holding your primary, you know, the kind of generic stuff, or like an Astra Militarum where that is literally your game plan is hold firing lines, flip your opponent's primary and lock down your primary. That doesn't necessarily need to change, but maybe the units you do it with, or the methods, or maybe you do it a turn later to slow down the game a little bit. All these kind of just different tempo things, or different ways you can, or maybe actually they have an issue dealing with transports. I'm going to put the Chimera or the Rhino on this point to force them to have to crack that open, so then I get some extra value out of this. So little things like that, where it's like, oh, okay, now they have to send 2 units out because they need 1 to crack the Rhino and then 1 to kill the unit inside. And now I'm up like 200 points when I kill that stuff that's come out there. Awesome, sweet, like that. Those kind of trades can be really, really important. So understanding and seeing this in either the list, in the deployment, or in that first 1 or 2 turns of how they want to do their game plan, and how do you counter these things. And with that is this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, this kind of video is really fun to do. These kind of things are the bits of 40k that I really enjoy talking about. They're very fun. It's the little nitty gritty things like, oh, how do I, you know, you can take your list in certain ways, but like once you've locked your list in for an event, you kind of just have to have these kind of other plans, right? Like, oh, if I go up against Elder, how do I deal with warp spiders or whatever it may be? So please, in the description below or in the comment section below, talk about how you've countered other armies, whether it's been like a really clever movement trick, identifying what issues could arise in the game and then playing around them, whatever it might be, and like and subscribe, all the good things you're normally supposed to do. Otherwise, I've been Chris, and I'll see you guys next time.